9 against the 9.
9 against the 9.
9 against the
9
9.
against the 9.
9 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 against the 9,
9 against the 9.
a podcast about Lord of the Rings.
All right. We're here to talk about evil.
So this episode is, what's the title of this episode? The Nature of Evil?
Yeah, in my notes I have the ring and the nature of Sauron's power and evil in general.
Evil in general. And I was prepping thinking about the nature of evil in general and what is evil. Also with the ring.
Yeah, I have a lot of notes on this one. And the first thing that's listed in the notes is corrections. Do you have any corrections? Are you keeping track of things that you said? You probably haven't listened to the previous episodes as often.
Not as often
as I have.
I've listened to the first two, not Gollum. There was a correction. I forget it. I don't have it in my mind because you're surprising me with this.
I know, I'm sorry.
Unprepared. I'm unprepared.
For the listeners who care, it's been approximately, 3 months, 4 months since we did the previous episode. Clark is living in a different location, and we're recording in a different location than we previously were recording. But all is well, otherwise. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of balls in the air.
The road goes ever, ever on.
As they say. So my corrections are as follows. We spent a ton of time talking about Faramir, trying to track down Faramir's halfling prophecy. He had this prophecy that he was telling Frodo about how with the halflings would come the Isildur's bane would they would see it again, and the halflings would come and the end of the world or whatever. And we couldn't find it, and that's because we were looking in the Two Towers, and it's at Elrond's place at the Council of Elrond.
Council of Elrond in Rivendell.
Yeah, either Boromir
Fellowship.
or Aragorn says the whole thing. And then Gollum versus the elves. We were like, why does Gollum hate the elves so much? In the Gollum episode, but you haven't listened to it.
No.
He hates them because they were keeping him prisoner in Mirkwood, I think under Gandalf and Aragorn's orders.
Yes.
Legolas says that also in the Council of Elrond.
Yep.
And then my final correction is that we were talking about Gandalf. And I was saying that the Silmarillion said that he was like a sort of a patron Maiar of Lorien or Lothlorien, which terms I get confused.
Lorien and Lothlorien?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the distinction is.
Aren't they the same?
Sure. But my concern was, why is a Maiar there when they should be in Valinor? And the answer is, as I'm sure nerds know already, that Lorien exists first in Valinor and then later in Middle-earth as a sort of like a New England kind of situation.
Yeah, I was thinking New York.
New York.
York and New York.
Mm-hmm. Same situation. I don't think that's what Loth means, though. That would be sweet if it did. So those are my corrections, and I don't know.
I do have one point up from the Astari episode, as I was re-listening to the stories. The Valar are mentioned because we were talking about like the rituals and
they're mentioned in what?
They're mentioned in the Two Towers in the episode of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit.
Yeah.
The men of Gondor are ambushing the.
I know this one.
Right, and so the what's it? What does Sam call it? Oliphant. The Oliphant is raging, and some Damrod says, "May the Valar turn him aside."
Mm-hmm.
Mumak.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it's like, heaven help us, God help us, but the Valar.
I was thinking we might get back to that in the Miscellany episode, where we might talk about religion and the role that, like,
or some might say miscellany.
Do they?
I don't know. I would, but what do I know?
Maybe, yeah. I might be totally wrong.
Also,
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that word out loud.
I also say admin, and other people say admin.
What? That's crazy talk.
What do I know?
So that's what's up with the corrections, and we're here to talk about evil and Sauron, and by extension Mordor and the Ring, and I think also Saruman, even though we've talked about him a bit, Because I think he's evil. It's an evil dude.
Okay.
Okay, so I have random. Here's my big categories, and for this episode, I have more quotations, more textual support than ever, which may be a function of my being in the middle of teaching an AP Literature and Composition course, wherein we're stressing quotations and textual evidence. So you're gonna hear a lot of that. And as always, my quotations are from the Ballantines with the fancy covers, fancy wacky fantasy covers. See episode 1 for more details, or show notes if those things exist. Also,
if we have made those things.
Also, my books are 25 feet away, and I'm gonna have to go get them in a minute. So, my notes are organized into several sections, and the first one is random intro stuff, and I definitely think that we should start with random intro stuff. And then I've got why Sauron is evil. That's a category. And then I've got why Saruman is evil. And then I've got why Mordor is an evil place. And then I've got why the ring is evil. And then I've got henchies and lesser rings and and then I've got getting beyond evil. I think there's one moment where I feel like we get kind of beyond this good evil paradigm in this book. And do you have any sort of organization of your notes, or do you want to start up with that intro stuff?
Your notes are much more organized than mine are. It seems like you have more preparation and things written and prepped for it, and feel like I'm going to be, as they are in Rivendell, like sitting and thinking. Like if you like sitting and thinking best, that's what I'm going to do, and sort of like respond. I have a few notes, and they will probably come up as you hit your points. So I feel like we're going to go with your points, and
Word.
I will fill in my notes in there.
And you can already see how some of your notes fill in some of those, hit some of those categories. Cool.
There's also I'm going to bring in the idea of power with evil and connecting power to evil. And I want to circle back to those blue wizards.
Word. I'm down to circle back to them whenever.
Going to Far Harad. Because that came up when I was thinking about that recently.
Cool. So let's not define evil, but talk about this problem of evil and a definition of evil.
So we're not going to define evil, but we're going to talk about it to define it.
I think we're going to have to talk about what the various definitions might be. I don't want to define it for myself per se. I think that there's a classic definition of evil as being like a distance from the good. You familiar with that notion that evil is really just a distance from divine good or moral good or whatever?
I'm not familiar with that as a concept. But I would be like, there's good and the counterpoint is evil. Evil is the opposite of good. Like a binary good and evil. The black and the white versus like a grayscale.
Word. But I feel like you previously have referred to this notion of hell as being like a distance from divine love.
The idea of a Christian hell is, yes, it's suffering. It's always talked about like it's pain, like fire, like this, like whatever. Some people are like, it is that. When I was in Catholic school as a child, the religion teacher that we had religion class every day had the idea, or shared the concept that it feels like all of that because at that point God, the one almighty God, has withdrawn his love from you. He no longer loves you. You go to hell, and that absence of that love is suffering. But that is different from the Nordic mythology idea of hell as a place. Like not everyone goes to Valhalla. Some people go to hell, and like it's like a place.
Mm. Yeah,
I'm not as familiar with that, and I'm gonna read more about that soon.
But hell aside, you're saying that evil is related to that suffering. Is evil related to that suffering, or is evil more of an active anti-good principle to you? If that makes sense.
Evil is more of an active anti-good principle, and in Christianity, it seems to me that if you are evil, you will end up in hell, which is suffering.
Okay. malevolent, right? Evil intent, a bad intent, as opposed to just an absence. I'm more inclined, I think, towards the former notion of like a distance from what's healthy or good. But I think in this book, we're dealing with the more active malevolence.
Yeah, that for sure for me, there's an active thing in there, but that's also not like the idea of intention. So if it's an active malevolent intention, that aligns more with my understanding of evil. But my understanding of even intention has been challenged in the last few years reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, and there's a brilliant quote in there about intention, and like the intention doesn't matter because bodies are still broken.
Right. Damage
is still done.
Sure.
Regardless of intention.
So I think that doesn't necessarily segue, but I want to mention this thing about this kind of D&D tabletop role-playing notion of alignments, chaotic versus lawful, and good versus evil.
That's a D&D thing?
Well, I mean, that's where
I've heard of that, but it was not in a D&D context.
I know it from that semi-exclusively, or everything that I know that references it seems to be referencing.
And this is a grid that's lawful, might be on the left,
sure,
chaotic on the right, and then neutral in the middle. It's a nine squares. Ooh, 9 against the 9.
Yeah.
9 boxes, lawful on the left, for example, chaotic on the right, neutral in the middle, good at the top, neutral in the middle, evil at the bottom.
Sure. I like lawful on the right and chaotic on the left, but sure.
That's what I said. Is
Great.
that what I said?
I hope. Even better. Anyways, but evil in that, like I'm not going to pull out the book, but I'm sure that they define it, and I think that the definition probably bears on a notion that the being prefers the suffering of others, prefers pain, others' pain, prefers to destroy. An anti-life impulse.
What book is this here?
Like the Player's Handbook or whatever for
D&D.
Various editions. They've been defining it for years.
What you've just said reminds me of Toni Morrison and the quote that she had in an interview with Charlie Rose back in the 90s or 80s or something, that if you can only be tall because someone else is on their knees, then you have a serious problem.
Sure.
So if you enjoy the suffering of others because it makes you feel good.
Yeah, sadism, let's say. Something like sadism. Okay, so these are my top 3 takes on what Tolkien means when he is referring to evil. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about defining evil in the Tolkien, like what Tolkien means by evil?
Isn't that what we're doing now?
Yeah. Well, we were kind of talking about how the world and culture in the West.
Right, so what's Tolkien's view? Because we're talking about his work of...
Yeah, so you ready? Here it comes. 1, I think discord. There's a notion of discord. As opposed to love or accord. Discord.
Sure. Discord. I hear you.
I got a quote from Aragorn. He's going to come up a lot. Aragorn's got a lot to say about evil, which makes sense in kind of retrospect, thinking of him as like a leader character. Got a lot to say about evil. Typically unsubtle, he says, it is difficult to know with these evil folk. It's difficult to know when they are in league and when they are cheating one another. So I think a theme that we're going to return to a lot is that evil in this book is often anti-evil. The forces of evil are duplicitous and self-inflicting.
Evil is anti-evil.
Evil fights itself. Evil eats itself. It consumes itself in a way that, in this book, evil is discord, and discord is like a kind of an unstable contradiction. Maybe. Who knows?
So this is like Sauron trying to like steal power from Sauron.
Sure.
They're not unified.
Yeah.
This is like
orcs can't get along. Yeah.
Orcs fighting each other. Some orcs being like, yeah, we'll just take a few trusty lads and move out to somewhere else and start our own thing.
Yep. So that's discord. 2, and this one's very dear to me politically and socially, possessiveness and autocracy. And by that I mean power over others, unimpeded exercise of singular will. Autocracy, right? I want to be in charge of everything, and I want everyone and thing to be subordinate to my will.
This reminds me of a faculty meeting I had this week.
Go easy. You're on the air.
Where we looked at there was a score, some rating score of like individualistic versus community or group cultures.
Countries by
country. And the United States was 91 in individual, like independence and individuality.
Along with Australia, right?
And Guatemala was like 6.
Yeah, I know the chart or the list.
And then a colleague also says, like, isn't that interesting that we think of 91 as being like a good score, and like this is our own, like even the scoring system has this bias in it where we're like, 91, that's good.
I see what you're saying. It could have been flipped around. We could
right. I mean, it might be flipped around. They might be like, it's this for individuality, and they flip it and like inverse it for the other one. What was presented to us as the United States as a culture, very individual, very possessive. See white picket fence as an American icon.
Yeah. Ownership. Sure. And then
also see Maslow presenting the ideas of the Blackfoot Nation to the Western mode of thinking, which is it's just more of a selfish, independent, individualistic.
I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but you mean Maslow is in the hierarchy?
Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
Which
you're saying he ripped that off indigenous people?
He went and got ideas from the Blackfoot Nation. Got ideas from the Blackfoot Nation and presented them towards more Western modes of thinking, and did not give them credit.
Something always struck me as corny about that. Anyways, the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
right?
Even though it's obviously grounded in some essential truths, or like not truths, essential observations about being alive,
the human condition,
sure, or the biological condition, or whatever. Yeah. So 3, last, wastefulness. Waste, that comes up a lot in this book. Wanton destruction, as opposed to cultivation or whatever. And I'm struck. I can't, and I don't want to quote it because it's gross. But there's this guy in history and in literature, Gilles de Rais. That's how I'll say his name. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it's pronounced. Gilles de Rais. He was the companion of Joan of Arc, and then a notorious like child murderer, torturer, all around bad guy.
All around bad. Dude.
Yeah, he's a bad guy, and he's been in a couple books. And he's quoted in books, and also maybe in his testimony, because his testimony is a matter of like historical record, as saying things to the effect of like the incentive and the drive for him has something to do with like being empowered by a notion of abject wastefulness, like how wasteful it is to destroy young lives, destroy stuff, act in ways that are counterproductive, deliberately counterproductive to healthy living. Abject wastefulness is evil in this book and in other spheres of thought.
What comes to mind is the phrase "balling out of control."
I don't know that phrase.
Like if you're a baller, you're like spending a lot of money. You're doing
oh
a lot
yeah,
of
I
things,
see. Okay,
like,
I got you. Yeah.
And you're balling out of control. You're just like living it up
yeah.
to like
burning money.
degree.
Yeah,
Money,
yeah. And then there's like a fourth optional maybe thing. Despair seems to be related to evil, but I think it maybe is more like an outcome of evil. Classic example would be Denethor at the peak of his despair in Return of the King. Ballantyne 157, the West has failed. Abject despair. The project is a total failure. That maybe is a result of evil. I don't know if despair itself is evil. So I'm good with defining evil, and I'd love to talk about Sauron and why he's evil.
So you're good that we have defined evil, or like the realm of what we mean by when we talk about evil?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. You want to say more about evil in general evil, like extra book evil, or like what it means in the book?
No, I think, general badness, distance from good, discord, possessiveness, wastefulness. These are all good things. This is the realm of the definition.
Are you ready to move on to talk about the big guy?
The big one, Sauron.
Yeah. I've got to go run and grab some texts. I'll give you a little music real quick too. I want to start in a stupid place with Sauron. There's this. I don't know if people care about the Far Side. I was obsessed with the Far Side when I was young. Wrote like papers on it and stuff. Still think it's really good. There's a Far Side comic, and there's a therapist, and he's talking out loud, and he's writing on his pad, and he's saying, "Frankly, you've got a lot of anger toward the world to work out, Mr. Pembrose." And on the sofa is apparently the patient, but it's just an eyeball. It's just one eye. And I'm looking right now at the Prehistory of the Far Side, a 10th anniversary exhibit by Gary Larson. And it's annotated. It says, "This cartoon about Mr. Pembrose evidently left a fair number of people wondering what in God's name was going on here. Mr. Pembrose, from whatever circumstances in his life have rendered him such, is only an eye." Yes, that's supposed to be an eyeball resting on the couch. The image all but vanished after size reduction. And who couldn't have more than a little anger toward the world if ending up as an eye was the card life dealt them? And then he says, okay, maybe it doesn't work. I thought it worked. I thought it was hilarious the first time I read it. And I'm reminded of Sauron because he seems to have been reduced through circumstances in his life to just an eye. And he has a lot of anger toward the world to work out. If what he has is anger, it might be something more like malice or malevolence.
And this is a proportional eye in the comic, so it's the size of the psychiatrist's eyeball.
It's like a little bit bigger than a human eye.
This is why it was reduced to newspaper doesn't really work because it almost disappears.
Yeah, none of that's relevant to Sauron. I just think it's funny. Yeah, what do you want to say about Sauron? Because I have a lot to say about Sauron.
Why don't you go first?
Okay. So first of all, Sauron is so big and evil and abstract that when I first saw the Fellowship of the Ring, the movie, it starts with that battle scene.
Yes.
From the end of the Second Age. And I think prior to that, it can be really difficult to understand what battle with Sauron would be like. He had a form in that thing.
In the movie, he had a form as a giant.
Yeah, he's a giant, though. Like, he was chosen...
Like a titan.
Yeah, he's like a... Yeah, I mean, even a titan is a notion. It's just hard to conceive of what it means to fight the Dark Lord. You would think maybe he could just turn into like a vapor, or that he could become a feeling. There's some of that later in this book where like evil characters just kind of pervade as a notion or a feeling. But he's really manifest in that scene, and I think it's striking. I'll never forget his sweeping motions with his mace. That's why that movie is so traumatic and problematic for me as like an artist, because it dominates my thinking now about that scene.
Yep. Whereas, like in the book, he's not really described as a physical. There's no physical form described.
No.
And Sauron could be an abstraction of the idea of evil. So Sauron, you could replace Sauron with evil, perhaps, and it might work.
Yeah. So to that point,
the word Sauron with the word evil
in
the text.
To that point, Aragorn again. Return of the King 199, he has pity on the young men of Rohan because to them Mordor had been from childhood a name of evil and yet unreal, a legend that had no part in their simple life, and now they walked like men in a hideous dream made true, and they understood not this war, nor why fate should lead them to such a pass. And that feels really like World War I vet kind of stuff, doesn't it? Like, I was young, and I had this notion of war, and then I was thrown into it, and it was absolute. It was a literal walking nightmare. But to the young men of Rohan, it was just a fairy tale, now they're doing it.
Mordor was a fairy tale.
Yeah, now Aragorn's leading them into Mordor, to the gates of Mordor.
Right.
There's also Sauron is referred to. I think this is kind of funny. He's referred to at some point as he who we do not name, which I think is a nice cross-textual connection with the other Dark Lord that pervades...
He who must not be named.
Yeah, who pervades culture. Voldemort, also Dark Lord.
So it's with that and with Rohan and like these men of Rohan growing up always as like Mordor is the place of evil. I've been thinking about sort of the larger timeline recently. The Second Age, the Third Age. There's Morgoth in the First Age. Partly this is because the new series about Lord of the Rings that's out there that takes place in the Second Age, and these visuals like are striking, and then it like immediately first thoughts is like, oh, this is a long time, and the Third Age is thousands of years already, and the idea of Minas Ithil, which is now Minas Morgul, as a watchtower over Mordor, but these men of Rohan are growing up generations and generations of men, and this is a very long play where elves and men are like guarding against the first evil, but it's not obliterated, it's still there, but it's okay, we'll put it to the side. Maybe like a cancer that's benign but then turns malignant and then is trying to, what's the medical term? Metastasize into the rest of Middle Earth.
Sure.
So it's kind of like the war is to cut out a cancer before it metastasizes and destroys Middle Earth, as the people who live there now know it and like it, perhaps.
Sure. Some of what we're going to say today is going to get into the territory that we need to cover in episode 7 about supremacy.
Yep.
And it's going to be hard to, it's not going to be hard, it's just going to be the reality that we're going to talk about evil in the Tolkien universe here, and we're going to acknowledge when when he's confused, when he's actually talking about some sort of anxiety about a shift away from supremacy towards something like plurality.
And that's what I was trying to choose my words carefully to say that, to be like in the realm of Middle Earth, that is what's there, but it's the people who live there now. It's not the people of Far Harad who maybe Sauron is their champion.
Yeah, and
against the supremacy model.
So if we're gonna, yes, agreed, and we're gonna try to analyze evil at like what the notion is, and so maybe it's worth noting that in Tolkien's worldview, evil might be. I think what's happening is that he, to the extent that he's conveying racist notions, I think he's projecting real anxieties about something that we all think are, some things that we all agree are evil, like discord, wastefulness, and autocracy. Mm-hmm. And I think he's like projecting that onto, to the extent that this is what any sort of racist theory about evil does, is it puts genuine notions of evil onto a group of people that we don't know, just to excuse ourselves from it. It's just a shadow projection.
In a way, the ideas of wastefulness, possessiveness, these like abstract notions of evil are like the paint that he's trying, like he's using that as paint, but he's putting it on a canvas, and the canvas is inherently modeled on, is sort of like a supremacy model. He's putting it on a surface.
Yeah, I don't know about inherently. But
not inherently,
I
but
do
like
think
that's sort of the surface idea.
That can be happening.
We want to talk about the paint in this episode, not necessarily the canvas underneath.
That's a subtle and elaborate and I think accurate analogy. So I hope the readers understood it. Hit the back 15 button or whatever. if we have those.
That's why I like books, because that's why sometimes when I talk with you, I wish it was in text, because you'll say something and then you'll be like 3 sentences or like 30 seconds in, and I'll be like, wait.
Yeah.
What did you say? What was the first thing you led with? Because I want to go back and check that.
We'll get back to it, as they say.
I wish I could pause you sometimes and rewind.
Get back to Sauron. Get your mind back on Sauron. Okay.
The eye that is on the tower.
What about
the eye in the tower? The red eye. The symbol of the red eye. Sauron. This is me getting back to him.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that eye. I have some thoughts about that, but. Like, why is Sauron evil? That's my question. My notes say that, and I've said at least once on this podcast, he didn't actually do anything wrong. Like we don't know what his crimes are. So why is he evil? And so he must be, according to my notes or my theories, he must be discordant, autocratic, and wasteful. And I think he is. And I think that I've just got some random notes. So the heralds, it's not Aragorn, but it's kind of, it feels like Aragorn's propaganda coming through the heralds at the gates of Mordor in the Return of the King near the end of the book. They say, "Let the Lord of the Blacklands come forth. Justice shall be done upon him, for wrongfully he has made war upon Gondor and wrested its lands." So autocracy, right? Possessiveness and autocracy. "Therefore the king of Gondor demands that he should atone for his evils and depart them forever. Come forth." That's the formal accusation of Aragorn's reconstituted government against the Lord of the Blackland.
I like it's interesting that the word atonement is in there.
Mm-hmm. And justice.
Atonement and justice, and I can't help but think about restorative justice and the possibility of making amends for wrongdoing.
It's almost like it could happen, right?
It's almost like it could happen. It's like saying this is what we want. Like, we want this to happen, but I don't think there's any actual belief that that's going to be possible.
At the same time, I don't think Aragorn thinks he's going to outgun.
He doesn't. Like, he's at that time, he understands it. He believes it's a suicide mission.
He's counting on the hobbits, and that's why it's so devastating that the mouth brings out that the chainmail or whatever.
The mithril coat.
Right. Okay, and that's nerd shit. Sauron in the same scene is alleged by the narrator to decide to, quote, play these mice cruelly before he struck to kill. Hashtag wastefulness, right? If you're going to kill a mouse, you don't need to play with it.
So I have a quote because you're with the question of, is Sauron evil?
Why is he evil? But go ahead.
Or why is he evil?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, why is he evil? Which might even be like, why? Like, why is he evil? Depending on the emphasis of the reading. There's a quote-ish from the Fellowship of the Rings in the Council of Rivendell. I don't have a page number. I don't remember who said it. I didn't write it down, but the quote is, "Nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was not so."
Yeah, I don't know that quote, but I know that mythological reality or whatever in that mythological situation.
Should I try and find it?
If you want, I'm going to go dash over to get some books in a minute, because there's something, Boromir says something about Elrond, or says something in the Council of Elrond, that they could feel that at a recent confrontation between Gondor and, I guess, the forces of Mordor, or maybe like, what's Osgiliath?
Osgiliath is the town. It was the seat of power of Gondor. A river divides the town.
Is it the crossroads?
I think it's at a crossroads. It's at the river, so it's...
And it's close to Minas Morgul, right? When was it abandoned? In Boromir's lifetime?
Maybe.
Okay, anyways.
Or maybe before, and he retook it.
Okay. Boromir says something that he refers to it as a power like a shadow rider. Sort of with the forces of evil, as it were. And I think that's just an interesting notion about... I don't know if it refers to Sauron in particular. It might refer to the Lord of the Nazgul. But either way, that there's something kind of supernatural about the evil, rather than just being like a big, tough dude.
So Osgiliath is a town over the river between Minas Tirith and Minas
Morgul. Got it. Okay.
Closer to Minas Tirith, because that's where the river is.
I want to say another couple things about Sauron. This dude comes to the Lonely Mountain. This is another thing that's said in the Council of Elrond. Comes to Dane. Is that his name? King Dane of the elves? Of the dwarves?
Dane of the Iron Hills.
Dane, yeah.
Yes.
So he's up at the Lonely Mountain. He probably inherited it.
Sauron himself?
No, he sends an emissary.
An emissary.
This dude comes up and offers three...
Yes.
He offers 3 rings and Moria forever, quote, forever, in exchange for, quote, the thief of the ring. Because he's trying to track the ring back through the situation with the dwarves from The Hobbit.
He's trying to get his his precious back.
Yeah, yep. And it says, refuse, and these things will not seem so well. And then Dane says he'll consider. And the dude says, consider well, but not too long. And then Dane says, the time of my thought is my own to spend. And the dude's like, for the present. Because he knows that Sauron intends to take away their will. That's the point, right? All this is from the Fellowship, Council of Elrond, 317. Glowin tells it. the message there seems to be like, surrender willingly now or surrender unwillingly later, because the project of evil is autocracy and the eradication of independent will, or the subordination of will to the like Dark Lord.
Kind of like compliance.
Yeah, absolute compliance in body and mind. A couple more things on Sauron. We get back to this all the time. He can't imagine anyone would do anything but try to wield the ring, and he knows it won't work for them. So that's his like Achilles heel, is that he can't imagine that anyone would throw away the ring, because he assumes everyone else is as autocratic and willful as he is, and possessive.
Yeah, perhaps he can't imagine that it would be destroyed, and that's interesting because in Lothlorien, Galadriel's talking with Frodo about the ring. Frodo said something like, how come like if I'm wearing the ring I can't see all the other rings or know where the 9 riders are and all of that, and Galadriel kind of hints that like, well, you haven't tried to do that. It might also destroy you to do that, because the ring seems to have power proportional or relevant or in connection with the desire and power of the wearer, and like she hinted like Frodo would have to prepare long, like an arduous preparation to try and do that, and it would still probably destroy him.
What's it called in D&D? He would have to attune to the ring. Spend some time attuning to it.
Right. But Frodo could see the ring on Galadriel's hand, which other people can't see. So like she's just wearing this ring. He can see it. Other people can't.
Word.
Or maybe he can perceive it and they can't perceive it.
We're going to come back to the ring, just so you know. Word. This is the last thing I want to say about Sauron. 253 of the Two Towers in my books. That's when Pippin relates probably the only character's direct interaction, not even direct, FaceTime interaction with
like mind time. It's like telekinesis,
but it's for Pippin. It's
telepathy
through the Palantir.
It's telepathy, not telekinesis.
Right, telepathy. So I'll just read the scene real quick. He's looking at the Palantir and tiny stars, dark sky, tall battlements, tiny stars. It seemed very far away and long ago, yet hard and clear. Then the stars went in and out, whatever that means. They were cut off by things with wings. Very big, I think, really. But in the glass, they looked like bats wheeling round the tower. I thought there were 9 of them, little on the nose. One began to fly straight toward me, getting bigger and bigger. It had a horrible... No, I can't say. I tried to get away because I thought it would fly out. But when it had covered all the globe, it disappeared. Then he came. Italicized but not capitalized. He did not speak so that I could hear words. He just looked and I understood. Is this Sauron or is this someone else?
It's got to be Sauron.
You think? Okay.
It's got to be. How can it not be?
Well, it's hard because he's an eye. He has no form, so it's not clear who he is or what he is.
But he's not just an eye. He's got a mind. He's got a brain. Even the eye on that Sykes couch has, like...
He's a mind.
Like,
he has an ego.
Communicating.
An ego. Okay, and he says...
It's the soul, I guess, perhaps.
So you have come back. Why have you neglected to report for so long? This fool thinks it's Saruman. It's because he doesn't have an actual eye, or he doesn't actually know who's on the phone.
He doesn't have caller ID for the Palantir.
Right, he doesn't, yeah. That's funny to me. I did not answer. He said, "Who are you?" That's when he figures it out. I still did not answer, but it hurt me horribly, and he pressed me, so I said, "A hobbit." So there, he's being cruel. He's pressing to get the answer. What was my Discord? The opposite of love. The hobbit's like, "Don't squeeze me." He's like, "I will squeeze you. Give me what I want." Evil. Then suddenly he seemed to see me, and he laughed at me. It was cruel. It was like being stabbed with knives. We get some real sadism in this scene. I struggled, but he said, "Wait a moment. We shall meet again soon. Tell Saruman that this dainty is not for him." I think that's a hilariously sadistic villain line. Do you think it refers to the Hobbit, I think.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because to me it suggests that Saruman has like a culinary or like erotic interest in this childish character. This
Interesting.
dainty is not for
Like
him.
a sweet, because it's like sweet meat versus
Yeah.
a hobbit might be sweet meat versus orc, which might be like tough and
yeah.
bitter
Or
meat
an
or whatever.
elf meat that's 2,000 years old. They get a little tough after the first millennium. I will send for it at once. Could be talking about the ring too. He is maybe talking about the ring. I will send for it at once. Do you understand? Say just that. This is a crazy line right here. Then he gloated over me. I felt I was falling to pieces. No, I can't say any more. I don't remember anything else. The final stroke of malice is that he gloats over him. Then he gloated over me. It feels
That's a penalty. Flag. That's a flag. 15-yard penalty for taunting.
gloating. It feels almost euphemistic, doesn't it?
That's a technical foul.
But does it feel euphemistic? Does it feel like he's saying something else happened then? It's
Pippin is saying something else happened.
Well, it just
Like,
it's menacing. It's menacing in a way that's unspeakably menacing. It's like an assault, like a sexual assault, or like an emotional violation,
Yeah,
or
okay.
a psychological violation. He gloated over me. It just strikes me. I don't know what it is.
like trash talking, like shit talking a little bit.
But it's curious.
But
that,
like that's just like super minor. Sort of like Gollum grabs Sam from behind and he celebrated before he had both hands around his throat. He like taunted him a little bit.
I guess what concerns me is that he's already been pressed and hurt
Pippin
horribly.
has.
Yep, Pippin's already been pressed, hurt horribly, and it felt like he was being stabbed with knives when he was laughing. And then, like, the final torment is then he gloated over me. I felt I was falling to pieces. Like, what is the nature of that malevolent Dark Lord gloating? It's like some real serious gloating. It's a gloating that makes you fall to pieces.
That's the sadism. That's the enjoying other people's pain
And it almost
suffering.
and it almost transcends language, because gloat is clearly not the right word for what happened.
What would be
It's
the
not,
right word?
I don't know. There's no sufficient word to describe being gloated.
It doesn't. Gloat is not enough.
Gloated on by the Dark Lord. Still talking about evil. Still mired in evil. I want to talk about Saruman, but maybe we should talk about Mordor since we're talking about Sauron.
Yeah, keep it like geographical.
Sure. We'll do Mordor and the ring, and then we'll hit Saruman at the end. Yeah.
Saruman at the end. Sure, fine.
Okay.
Do we know the history of Mordor?
I don't know too much about it. No.
I mean, in the Men of Rohan's time, it is always the place of like evil, darkness, whatever, corruption, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, I have a map book here somewhere. It's probably downstairs. That's got descriptions of Mordor in it that are attempts to geographically understand it, and I think volcanic activity plays a role in the geographical horror of Mordor, and maybe also like something like toxic water situation.
Yeah, do not drink of the water that flows from the valley of Minas Morgul, Minas Ithil.
Sure, but that's all corrupted. I'm about to hit you with some real serious. Some of the most evil landscapery is around Minas Morgul,
which was at the Tower of the Moon, which was a city of men and like beautiful city. It's also of the moon, which is darker than the sun, the counterpoint to the sun, which is nighttime and darker. So there's already this like little hint of darkness. Maybe it's like borderline.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a little nervous that you're watching these movies on Netflix and that you're picking up a lot of bad parasites.
That's not from that.
Okay, good. I just got nervous for a second.
I'm a little nervous too.
I got nervous a while back about that.
Yeah.
That shit's played out. All the kids know that Netflix and Amazon had played. It's over. The internet's dead, man. The only thing popping on the internet is 9 Against the 9.
Delete your account.
Mordor draws all evil things. That's a quote. This is all from Shadow of the Past, Fellowship of the Ring, page 91. A new shadow in the south with a hatred of the west. That's what's going on in in the Third Age, late Third Age. There's all kinds of stuff about Mordor. At one point in the Two Tower, the night seemed endless. Mordor's always shrouded in clouds.
Yeah.
Black clouds
Right.
covered the land.
And that's also partly, there's a part practicality to that, because orcs are the servants of the soldiers of, it's like his people are the orcs, Sauron's people are the orcs, and they have an aversion to light.
Yeah, they
and
can't
the
be around
sun.
in the light, right?
So part of that is to protect them.
That's why they
UV
Yeah.
rays, sunshine,
or they live there, right? Because it's the only habitable space other than underground.
right, because
Draws all evil things.
there's less light, right?
Right. This is hinging on a long-standing concern that is certainly Western, but I think maybe more a human issue of like aversion to darkness, or an anxiety that darkness is evil because we're diurnal. I think it's that simple. I think that we fear the darkness, and I think to a bat or an owl, hell might be a very brightly lit place.
The darkness is not our element if because we also rely on sight very much, and we can see better in the daytime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's this unknown element to the darkness, and we have an inherent maybe we have a fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
We don't understand it, and therefore we're afraid of it.
I think it's neat. This is a little like just a last note on darkness in Mordor. I think it's neat that Sauron can push the darkness out with his troops and suck it back in. That's a thing that happens in a couple times in the last couple books.
Like his troops are Eeyore, and they have that cloud over them.
Is that what
always.
goes? I didn't know that about Eeyore.
Eeyore walks around, and there's always just like a single cloud over him that
Drawn
rains
over-
on just
yeah.
him.
No, I'm aware of that trope in cartoons,
He's got
but I didn't
right.
know.
That's the
yeah.
That's the Eeyore.
I didn't know
trope.
You're saying it originated with Eeyore, you think?
In my life,
Okay.
in my experience, that is where it comes from.
Yeah.
But did A.A. Milne get it from somewhere else? I don't know. Did he
He-
make it
he
visual, and the visual's like, oh, now I get it.
He appropriated it.
Maybe.
Okay,
Yep.
So darkness, sure. And the other thing that I became very aware of in looking for quotations to support why Mordor is evil is that it's very tied in with scatological anxieties about feces, and specifically vomit. Very, very vomit aware writing. And then I don't know if this counts as scatological, but there's an element of like there's a lot maggot. The word maggot gets used a lot to speak of Mordor and the people who inhabit Mordor, the folk who inhabit Mordor. And I think there is a relationship between insects and bugs, and grubs, and worms, and human feces, and like things that we can't eat that other animals can, and those animals are disgusting and scary to us.
There's also that the word maggot. The maggot is used like orcs to orcs. They're like, get off with you, maggot.
Oh,
But-
they use it themselves, huh?
Yeah, I feel like they do. But also, I can imagine a drill sergeant in the U.S. Army being like, drop and give me 20, maggot.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Something small and helpless, but also voracious and hungry, right?
And also, I would add, like, disgusting.
Yucky. Yeah, I guess the question is why yucky, but let me give you some quotes about scatological Mordor. This is from The Return of the King. I'm not even sure what it means exactly. This is when Aragorn and them are at the gates, near the gates. North amid their noisome pits lay the first of the great heaps and hills of slag and broken rock and blasted earth, the vomit of the maggot folk of Mordor.
There it is. All of it.
Yeah. So I'm not even sure what's going on, but I think what he's saying is there's an element of wanton destruction, like that the Mordor project is that they're just like destroying stuff, maybe digging holes and burning stuff and digging holes and burning stuff with no element of rejuvenation. I don't know what...
Yeah, the rejuvenation part, yes. Because that's the rejuvenation, the new seed to life. Because you do need the corruption and
Yes.
the decomposition for life.
Every gardener knows that.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is like buzzards are huge. Buzzards and vultures are a huge part of that cycle. And
Yeah.
maybe they get a
And
bad
so are
rap.
maggots. So
Because
are
like,
maggots.
ooh, they're gross. But like they are required.
We view them as gross because they're on the other side of the cycle as we are.
Correct.
If that, not that
Perhaps.
they're sides, but like they're in a different part of the
They're,
cycle.
yeah. They are different.
Yeah.
They are other.
Right. I got more. Two Towers 239. Mountains had vomited the filth of their entrails upon the lands about. It was as if, I think there must be rocks strewn about, and for whatever reason, it looks like vomit. Mountains had vomited the filth.
Well,
of
yeah.
their
I mean, I like that. They are like sort of the way that you... what's the word I want? Expel, empty
Sure.
your stomach.
Yep.
The mountains are doing that with...
Purging.
Yeah, so you purge your stomach, the mountains are purging their stomachs, and you're like, "Bleh,
Yep.
bleh," and like,
That's evil.
and because there's something evil in your body that's
Sure,
going to make
yeah.
you
Oh,
sick,
yeah,
so your
right.
body is like, get this out, and maybe the mountains are like, get this out, and then the lava is evil.
Yeah, maybe.
So the mountain's vomiting up this stuff as evil, but that's also the first step of new life. If you think about creation and you go way back in time and space, and the volcanoes of Earth, as Earth is being formed and perhaps born, that's part of it. Also, how does birth work into that?
I think
because birth is, you might say that a child is. What if you use the word vomit as like a child was vomited from the mother's uterus?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same, like it's out.
I think that Tolkien...
The body's like, this needs to be get out now or it will do harm.
Sure. I think that Tolkien is sort
time.
of not ignorant of, but deliberately... And it's probably cultural neurosis. I think that he seems to be kind of unwilling to accept that part. Really good and evil heavy cultures seem to be really neurotic about natural functions. I've noticed.
Sure.
So like I think that it's a flaw on his, not a flaw, but like it's his handicap that he can't see how and it's the fantasy world's handicap that it's so divided, that there's no balance.
I would say it's more than just the fantasy world.
Sure. Oh yeah. I'm just talking about the fantasy world.
Got it.
So then here's another one. Desolation. This is also from the Two Towers, same area, 239-ish. Desolation, lasting monument to the dark labor of its slaves that should endure when all their purposes were made void. I wrote curious passage, and just to be transparent, I'm reading my actual notes. Seems to imply that the aim is mere destruction, not exploitation or accumulation or transformation of any evil sort, like just abject wastefulness. And I wrote, see Silmarillion, Morgoth, quote, a spirit wasteful and pitiless.
That reminds me of Smaug and the desolation of
Sure.
Smaug.
Yeah.
But that was also accumulation of like treasure and hoarding and all
Yeah,
that.
but to waste it, he's not going to eat it.
No,
Can't eat the...
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of all of that? It becomes valueless at that point.
We've talked about the thing where gold turns to shit.
No.
In fairy tales, sometimes there's a trope where if the devil or elves give you gold, when they disappear, it turns to shit. And there's a long-standing sort of magical, mythological cross-association between the lowest of the low, Saturn and lead and shit and, mud, earth, and the highest of the high, gold, the sun, and like light. Long-standing association.
So maybe this is like on a line. If you wrap the line around, then they're next to each other.
Yeah.
Also,
You
like
paint
no
the
mud,
lead gold, and it's gold because it weighs about the same.
no mud, no lotus.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Same idea. Okay. Morgoth, spirit wasteful and pitiless. He and Sauron are said in the Silmarillion to have walked the same ruinous path down into the void. Again, with void, this notion of like absolute emptiness, meaninglessness.
I've got a thought about like the wanton destruction and destruction, because, and this is also the Toni Morrison quote, but I'm thinking about people I know and like working around people and having them come in and having them say things like, do you have anything to break? I want to break something right now. Or like my childhood, I throw a temper tantrum and I would break stuff. And the breaking of something that was like wanton destruction, it's desolation, but it feels good at the time. In the moment, it feels good. And I'm thinking about trauma that people have had or things that they've experienced that make them perhaps more prone to do that or want to do it, or like punching the shit out of some clay because there's no punching bag available, and like maybe doing that rather than punching a person. But what someone has experienced in order to want to do that. And I'm thinking like, man, what did Sauron experience? What's his history?
Mr.
What did Smaug experience?
Mr. Pembrose. Yeah.
Mr.
A lot of
Pembrose.
anger. A lot of anger toward the world.
You're
to work
reduced
on.
to an eye.
Yeah, that's exactly what's wrong with Sauron. He keeps losing these cosmic confrontations where he has an obscene upper hand.
This is like distance from love.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So he's not getting the love.
I got more to say about Mordor, but really quickly, I don't know a lot about this. Who are the people, the Yazidis? Do you know much about the Yazidi culture / faith? I don't know.
Yazidi, is this, how do you spell that?
Yazidi, but it's also, that's just a transliteration.
That also helps me understand like what you Yazidi. No, I don't know.
Okay, so they're a people that were famous 10 years ago because they were trapped by the Islamic State, maybe, on like a plateau, and they were being sort of systematically slaughtered.
A geographic plateau.
I think so, yeah. That's not my point, and I don't profess to know anything about their religion, really, but I've heard this, that the reason that they were being targeted was because they have a theological notion that Satan is redeemed because the fires of hell are extinguished by his own tears of repentance, and that ultimately he is atoned with the Creator, which I think is a gorgeous theological notion, but enough to, get fundamentalists really pissed off at you and want to kill you, I guess. So you were just talking about, what's wrong with Smaug, what's wrong with Sauron, and like being human beings here in the real world, and like educators or whatever, or like compassionate people who are interested in restorative justice, transformative justice. It just struck me as a nice notion.
It also has like redemption, and even in minors, like what I was taught in Catholic school, that you can, if you're a sinful life, if you repent, there's always that option of repentance, even on your deathbed, and then have access to heaven.
Sure.
You might be in purgatory for a long time, but you will eventually get to heaven. That's there.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of that for Sauron in this book, though, huh?
No.
Okay.
What does he repent? Nothing. What does he regret? I don't know. Seemingly nothing.
We don't get a lot of
change?
insights into his actual motives. We do sometimes, though.
His only voice is with Pippin.
Yeah,
that one scene we talked about.
There's another thing where Sauron, we do see Sauron's motives described by the narrator in Return of the King on 245. When he sees Aragorn in the Palantir, that's probably what's happening. But it's actually a scene with Sam and Frodo. But it says that the eye was like distracted. It says that the eye was turned inward, pondering tidings of doubt and danger. So there are motives ascribed by the narrator directly to Sauron, but rarely, and he only, I think, speaks to Pippin, which is crazy.
Right. He doesn't really speak, it's telepathy.
Getting back,
he looked and I understood.
Yes. Getting back to Mordor, if we could.
Yep.
Mordor as prison, slavery, surveillance state. A bunch of quotes. Day came, another dreadful day of fear and toil had come to Mordor.
Mordor as a prison and surveillance state, is this like Mordor, the natural boundary of...
No, inside it. Inside it.
Inside is the prison, and there's the watchtower of Minas Ithil, making sure no one gets out, and there's the Black Gate, which I think at one point was manned by humans to make sure like no one got out. Is this?
Oh, was it? I don't know that.
I think so.
No, I think
they were
like,
stationed. I think there were men stationed at the Black Gate. I might be getting this from the video game Shadow of Mordor.
I don't know that one either. I am talking about under Sauron's autocracy. I think that he is working the orcs to death.
He's maintaining that prison model of like Mordor is the prison, and now it's the orcs as servants.
Yeah,
an indentured servitude.
But your point is, it might have started from an external. It might have been an external prison.
The model already existed.
Sure.
Of humans, man being like, let's keep the evil and the darkness within the boundaries of these mountains.
Yeah, and it starts to become self-reproducing.
They're not going over the mountains. They'll go out through the Black Gate or Minas Ithil, and like we'll guard those two places.
So inside Mordor, the Land of Shadow. There's a whole chapter called the Land of Shadow. Page 238. I might dip into it of Return of the King. There's a whole bunch of evil description. It reminds me, one thing that it really reminds me of in my dumb cultural background is Super Mario Brothers 3. It's probably World 8. there's like a bunch of evil levels where the music is evil and there's all this fire and brimstone, stone and fire and
Fire and
lava.
brimstone, it's like Old Testament.
Sure, we use those terms.
Where the wrathful, vengeful God exists.
We use the imagery of fire and there not being grass, no greenage, darkness and fire and stone and rock and dirt.
Everything is hard and rigid. Nothing is green and supple.
There's a lot of maggots, like I said. We're going to get some more maggots in a minute. Lovecraftian scenery.
H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraftian scenery outside Mordor, especially luminescent flowers, Book 4. Near Cirith Ungol, 2 towers, 297. Wide.
Cirith. Or Kirith.
Yeah, no, it's Kirith. They're all hard C's. Near Cirith Ungol, 2 towers, 297. Wide flats lay on either bank, shadowy meads filled with pale white flowers. Luminous these were too. That's why I think it's Lovecraftian. Luminous these were too, beautiful and yet horrible of shape, like the demented forms in an uneasy dream. Right? And they gave forth a faint, sickening charnel smell, an odor of rottenness. An odor of rottenness filled the air. This is followed by a description of grotesque statuary and curling tendrils of cold steam on the bridge. And here the notion of evil seems to be aesthetic, like Gothic, right? It's tied to like a matter of symbolism and affectation.
Yeah, the grotesques of medieval cathedrals to frighten parishioners into behaving, like leading quote-unquote like good lives so they don't end up in hell and feel like the grotesque, like the pain twistedness of the grotesques.
That's what I was trying to figure out is like how is this imagery evil? What is it that's about spooky Halloween shit? What is the notion that why is it connected to evil? And I think that maybe is an important, I'm not sure if that's the only one, but that's important. There may be depictions of grotesque animal human forms are maybe depictions of torment.
Right. Also, I was thinking about this because when I was revisiting Shelob's lair, and Sam is like the smells of corruption, the smells of rotting, all of that. And I was thinking about that, and then I was like, well, why does Shelob's good with it? So like, and like the things, there must be like microorganisms that create those smells, and like they're fine with it.
Right.
Those things thrive in it, but it's disgusting to hobbits and perhaps humans because our biological bodies do not react well to it. So our bodies send the signals to the brain being like, this is gross. Don't eat it. And if you do, we will vomit it up.
Yeah.
Because it's unhealthy.
I want to get right at that notion of an ecological evil. Here's another quote from The Return of the King. This is plants inside Mordor. Great writhing tangled brambles sprawled. Some had long stabbing thorns, some hooked barbs that rent like knives. The sullen shriveled leaves of a past year hung on them, grating and rattling in the sad airs, but their maggot-ridden buds were only just opening. Flies, dun or gray or black, marked like orcs with a red eye-shaped blotch, buzzed and stung, and above the briar thickets clouds of hungry midges danced and reeled. And I was saying this is like a sort of like a counter-ecology, like a shadow version of like a Gaia, this like evil version of nature. It doesn't even make sense that maggot-ridden buds
that doesn't make any
open.
sense, because the buds will turn into flowers, which the pistils and the stamens, and that's the reproduction to continue their existence.
Yeah.
And if you have maggots which are
They won't
corruption and they're rotting, you'll never get that.
Unless
ecology is different.
Unless they that's how they pollinate.
Right. Maybe that is, or also maybe there's a fresh corruption with these maggots, and this generation of plants
is blighted.
Right, and it
Sure.
may be the last one.
Right. Either way, in either scenario, there's a heavy emphasis on wastefulness and the wanton destruction of natural cycles.
I'm also now thinking of those flies with the red splotch. That makes me think of a black widow spider, which is black with the red thing, the red mark on it, and we don't like those because they are venomous and could kill a human. But then I'm also thinking of the copy of the book of The Hobbit, which is black with red writing on it, and then Frodo and Sam in that section, in that meta section where they're thinking of themselves in a story, like, oh, do you think we'll be in a book with like that's black with red lettering? I think they might have said that, but like that's the imagery as well of a storybook.
Yeah,
that's weird.
The last thing I want to say about Mordor is this: more maggots. One last time, there's statues at the crossroads. I guess we're not in Mordor proper, but statues at the crossroads that are desecrated and beheaded, and they have idle scrawls mixed with the foul symbols that the maggot folk of Mordor used. That's really edging, in my opinion, toward a supremacist notion of what evil is.
Yep.
Especially, I really dislike the term maggot folk. It's really distasteful to me, and I also think it's suggestive of graffiti. To me, that's what people say about graffiti, and I don't think they are idle.
The foul scrawls.
Idle scrawls. Foul symbols.
Foul symbols.
Sure. So one man's foul symbol is another man's power symbol.
Now I'm thinking of Basquiat, writing, even most young kings get their heads cut off, and Jay-Z's like, yo, like there's power in that, and he writes a song called Young Kings.
Yeah. The other quote, and I don't have a page, I don't know how it got in here, but uncovered filth and refuse, trees hewn down wantonly and left to die, with evil runes or the fell sign of the eye cut in rude strokes on their bark. Similar language, again, wanton destruction, and a notion that the performative art of painting signs and symbols on it is not useful, that it's idle, and that it's a wasteful action.
This could be like a reaction to graffiti. You might look at the reaction to graffiti in New York City in the 70s, 80s. I'm also thinking like the trees cut down and left to die. I'm thinking that brings immediately to mind the taming of the wilderness quote, like heavy air quotes, taming of the wilderness of, again, heavy air quote, settlers using slash and burn techniques to turn forest into
grasslands. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, shadow projection, right? Because in Tolkien's English, so he's not necessarily living in the countryside. That I feel like that's a real, quote, New World kind of phenomenon. I don't know what it looks like in England with regard to that, but it seems like, again, kind of a Western projection. Like it's not us that's wantonly destructive. It's not the British people or their empire. It's the maggot folk of Mordor who are destructive and who are wasteful.
Mm.
But again, let's suspend some of that if we can till episode 7, where we'll come back hard at it. We're at what, episode 4?
4.
We're talking about ecological destruction, which makes me think we should segue to Sauron and then do the ring last.
Sure.
All right. Do you want to take a break? Or
yes.
Okay.
So we're talking about Mordor. We concluded Mordor. Did we conclude Mordor?
Yeah, we
got through all your
Mordor.
notes.
I want to talk about Sauron because we were talking about ecological destruction, and
so we're going to talk about Sauron and then the ring, and that's conclusion.
Yeah. So Sauron, we talked a lot in the Wizard episode about how Sauron is evil because of, or like the nature of his evil is, we've been calling it what, an ecological disorder or an industrial disorder?
He has an industrial disorder or an industrialization disorder.
Hashtag wastefulness. Yeah.
I like how you're the one using the hashtags here, but I'm the one that like started it.
You didn't start hashtags.
I didn't start it. I put it like I had a I'm worked up.
It's the first time you've ever clipped out on the mic.
I didn't start it, but I had a hashtag board.
Yeah. So,
were you using hashtags in the classroom before I showed up?
I'm not using hashtags in the classroom.
Yes, you are.
I would never have a hashtag board.
You don't have a hashtag board. You do use it in the classroom.
I am going to admit this to you, Clark. I think that your use of hashtags legitimized them for me in a way that I wasn't prepared to legitimize them prior to.
Sick.
Hashtag Sauron is evil.
Hashtag
Why?
industrial disorder.
Right. Gwaihir, the Lord of the Eagles.
The Wind Lord.
Yeah, the Wind Lord. He asks, he picks up Gandalf off of Saruman's tower that one time that he's trapped, and he says, if Saruman has become evil, then da-da-da-da-da. I just think it's a funny thing that Sauron is like on the edge, and then he's like, one day he's stepped over it, and he has become officially evil. His alignment has changed from like lawful neutral to lawful evil. Saruman.
Lawful neutral to
I think
evil.
Saruman moved from lawful neutral to lawful evil. He might have been lawful good at one point.
Yeah.
Why is he evil? He wants to join Sauron. That's one reason he's evil. He makes that plain, as well as his notions of a high and ultimate purpose to Gandalf before he traps him, and Gandalf refutes him for saying that. Gandalf's like, I've heard that kind of stuff from the emissaries of Mordor. High and ultimate purpose. Again, questionable, but questionable from like a supremacy model. Like maybe there is a high and ultimate purpose to what someone's saying is evil, but also maybe good intentions are always always have evil outcomes, but maybe evil outcomes do often spring from good intent. The road to hell, good intentions.
That's the phrase of like the road to. That's a phrase. The road to hell is often paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
See Ta-Nehisi Coates' intention.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, you ready? Here we go. Industrial disorder. Sam has a vision of the Shire. This is like a complex plot thing, but Sam's vision of the Shire in Galadriel's mirror, or her pool, or whatever, he's seeing when Saruman becomes Sharky, right?
Yes.
And that's what he's seeing. Saruman like moves his Orthanc deforestation project to the Shire.
Yes.
Out of spite, right?
You think it's out of spite?
I don't know. What else is it out of?
I don't know. Haven't really this is the concept of like he just moves it is interesting. I haven't thought about this, but he does because Orthanc is overthrown, taken away from him. The Ents come in, they change it. They're like, you're out. Then they let him leave. So then what does he do? He repeats a pattern, I guess, intentionally, unintentionally. Does he go to destroy the hobbits' home because that's what Gandalf likes? And is it spite? Is it just because they're he's powerful and he can do it?
Maybe it's just the next spot. Maybe it's the next honeypot. So there's a thing Gandalf says about Saruman, maybe to Saruman.
The next spot, made me think of like the Catholic Church and priests. Like a priest is ousted from one parish and they just move. Then he moves to another parish.
I was thinking, that's yucky and telling of evil. But also I was thinking of industrialism and sort of imperialism. It's just moving to the next resource place.
It can also be like tobacco farming in the 1700s. They would take a field, plant tobacco, would wreck the field of all nutrients, would suck them all out, and they'd be like, "That's fine. We've got hundreds and hundreds of acres that nobody was using."
That's an industrial disorder.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
We'll just
monoculture farming, but it's a symptom of industrial disorder. So Gandalf says this thing, and I didn't know where the quote was. I wrote it down a long time ago, and then I didn't track it. And then I tried to Google my way to find out what chapter it was in. And instead, what I found surprised me. So here's the quote. He that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom, which I think is an extraordinary quote and in line with my ethos.
I like that.
But here's what's curious about it. What I found when I tried to Google my way to its location, instead I found a bunch of people on the Tor website, the Tor publishing website.
TOR Tor Books?
Yeah, and on Stack Exchange, disputing Gandalf basically, and being like, and all these like academic-y, or I would say pseudo, but intellectual people in defense of science, they would say.
Yeah.
Being like
an autopsy.
Yeah, one of the articles is called Gandalf Was Wrong. But so that's an extreme version, but people being like, well, sometimes we have to, do something bad in order for there to be a good outcome, and everyone is happy that X, Y, and Z.
And this is exactly why I want to look up. I learned, I was given a phrase, or I learned a phrase, or an idea. I feel like it's a proper noun in academia. the phrase is moves to innocence, and that's the idea of like, does it justify? And this is also philosophical. Does the end justify the means? I don't know what moves of innocence means. It was given to me, and I'm like, that's interesting. I need to learn more about that. But doing bad to do good, that's the idea. And I'm also thinking about like the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks, and bad, like wrong is done, but it's for the greater good of all of this.
What is Henrietta Lacks?
Henrietta Lacks was a woman, a black woman whose basically, I think, body was used. I haven't read the book. I did find it recently, but I haven't read it. Her body was used for scientific research, I think, without consent, without family's consent.
Was it her eggs too, maybe?
No, this like cells,
Okay.
like cellular
Stem
research.
cells.
I think stem cells or something in there, which has like her cells. I think are in all that, like all 99% of vaccines.
Oh, vaccines, yeah.
I think that's it.
Ooh.
So then it's like saving all these people, but like,
right. So these are
ethically,
the people writing the article Gandalf is wrong is saying, like, look at what good that did ultimately, and that's fine that people feel that way. I just was kind of shocked that people are so ready to write off Gandalf. I thought it was kind of grim.
But there's a difference of in that quote, like if you break something to
Yeah.
find out how it works. But this is not the person who takes something apart to find out how it works.
No, I think that is what it is. I think if you have breaking and taking apart are the same thing when we're talking about living organisms.
Sure, because you can't put it back together. But if
most
we're talking
of the
about like
stuff is living
an alarm
organisms.
clock, a stereo receiver, a calculator, like or computer,
Those
take it
aren't-
apart.
yeah.
How does it work?
That's not evil though, and there's no ethical concern there
Right.
for most people. Although, yeah, I'd be willing to
But why
extend
is
agency
that-
to machines, but
Is that because you can put it back together and it'll work just fine? A car,
maybe,
for example.
yeah, maybe that's why.
But the only way to take apart a human or something that's living is to destroy it.
I don't think that's what Gandalf's talking about. I think he's talking about taking apart living infrastructures in order to find out what they're. But maybe I need to know what he's talking
So then
about.
is it okay to dissect dead humans, cadavers, like who have died of natural causes, but then like do you kill them and
You're
then
not
sell them to
breaking
science?
it. You're not breaking it.
But if
because it's already broken.
if you're in London or whatever and you're like, oh, this, these homeless people,
You kill them.
and you kill them and then
It's
you
breaking.
sell them to make a profit,
Yeah.
and then the scientists in operating theater have someone to dissect. That's different.
Yeah.
John James Audubon, who did these beautiful watercolor paintings of birds, he killed them.
Yeah.
He killed a bunch to do it.
Yeah, and ultimately, we don't need that shit. This is my ethics, obviously, and this is not the Tolkien ethic, but like, I'm pretty settled on that point. Is that because like in 200 years, I got a feeling those Audubon prints aren't going to be that valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It probably just doesn't matter.
I mean, Darwin did the same thing, collecting specimens.
Yeah, I don't
Not
think. Again, it doesn't
not
really
living
matter.
things, specimens.
Yeah, all that's yeah. That's a very peak of Victorian science mentality.
Victorian
that-
England.
Yep. It's not exclusive to England, but that's what I'm. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Darwin
don't,
was
I
in
don't
like
dig that stuff at all.
England, and that's where Tolkien's coming from, in the British Empire.
Tolkien seems to be aware of how yucky that is. Okay, so he's in the Blakean model, right? You know much about William Blake?
No.
Blake is one of the big romantic anti-science dudes, and by not anti-science, anti-industry, belching fumes into the sky kind of dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Famously described London, as like as a hell, as like an industrial hell.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Saruman, more industrial. Isengard's has an industrial defense mechanism, which reminds me of national tech defense, or like, what do we call that? The defense industry. In Two Towers,
Like Lockheed Martin and
Yeah, that whole-
missiles and
all that stuff.
Patriot missiles, anti-missile missiles.
all of that stuff.
Yep.
So Two Towers, 221. The Ents are going through. Pippin is describing how the Ents wrecked Isengard, right? How they
How the ends pop off.
deconstructed it, and he says they're breaking it down, and then suddenly up came fires and foul fumes. The vents and shafts all over the plain began to spout and belch, again with that like expulsive, purgative
Yep.
metaphor. Several Ents got scorched and blistered. One of them got caught in a spray of some liquid fire and burned like a torch. A horrible sight. He like just turns on these fumes and flames from like an underground system.
Sauron turns these things on.
Yeah. Suddenly up came fires and foul fumes. The vents and shafts all over the plain began
With,
to
like,
spout and belch.
His magic, the way he's like making
Maybe
the
with-
peak of
His
whatever that
magic
mountain
seems
was
kind of industrial, doesn't it?
sure. Or I don't.
Sauron's
or, like,
magic-
I don't know. I don't know if that's industrial or if it's just like fire. He's around industry.
Yeah.
Because he also Caracas. What's the
You're
mountain?
right. He has weather magic. Yeah, I know.
He's weather magic.
Sure. Okay. Saruman, there's a bunch of other things, but he's afraid of the woods. He's described at various times as like never walking in the woods anymore, or like being divorced from nature.
Yeah, that's where Radagast is.
And he
Radagast
thinks-
the brown. Radagast
Yep.
the fool.
Right, he hates Radagast. Gandalf, he thinks Gandalf wants, we talked about this stuff already, he thinks Gandalf wants to Orthanc and then Barad-dûr, despite his true plans. I was noting that the symbol of, here's a little quiz for the reader, or the listeners, pause it if you want after the question. What is the symbol of Isengard? What is the Isengardian charge?
The logo, the icon.
Yeah, the logo.
Coat of arms.
And the answer is?
A white hand.
The Hand of Isengard, which strikes me, in retrospect, although I should have realized it 100 years ago, as a really just blunt symbol of control and manipulation, right? The hand literally manipulates. Saruman's manipulation, Gimli says of that, the words of this wizard stand on their heads. In the language of Orthanc, help means ruin and saving means slaying. That is plain. Saruman.
So maybe saving means slaying. This is a good time to bring in Thanos.
If you want, yeah, bring him in.
Thanos as like the ultimate villain in the Marvel universe, and he was going to collect all those like the 5 stones and put it in his gauntlet, his super big glove, and this is going to spoil those things. If you spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you the ending. Thanos gets all of the stones. He gets the gauntlet. He snaps his fingers, and 50% of the people in existence instantly vanish. They die, I guess, but their bodies turn into dust. And he Thanos does this in order to save the universe because the overpopulation is destroying everything. So he ruins to save? So
Saving means slaying.
saving means slaying. Saving the universe means slaying the people. And this also connects to me with the idea of what we saw in the pandemic, during lockdown, when the whole world went to lockdown. A lot of people documented, look at these cities that are empty of people. There's no one's outside, no one's on the streets. Look at what happened with nature in the few weeks. And people are like, oh, the nature's rebounded and all of that, which to me also like hints of like maybe we are actively doing harm. Not maybe, like we seem to be actively doing harm to the earth now.
Yeah, and the removal of Saruman from Orthanc results in its like what naturification, the rehabilitation of the natural of the ecosystem. Sure.
In terms of like humans in the real world here, it may not be, in order to save the world, we may not need to slay people. We may not need to remove people. There could be other ways.
The industrial disorder. We need to cut out the industrial disorder.
Yes.
Yeah. This just comes to mind really quickly. Saruman's tampering with ecology is not limited to industrial sort of desecration and deforestation. He's also a genetic tamperer, right? He's genetically crossing types of orcs.
Right, he's breeding them.
Yeah. I mean,
this seems like a plantation owner.
It does. I was just going to say, like, and it not only is it we can extend, the white hand of the master. I think I'm done with Saruman. I think we've overdone Saruman on the show.
So you're like, you're done, Saruman. You're done.
Yeah. No, yeah, for real.
You're done, but also Saruman, you're done.
I'm done with the Saruman mentality. I am.
All right.
The ring.
This is your last point on your outline, right?
Well, I got some others.
This is the last main point,
Yeah, sure.
and then we'll do like a few miscellaneous.
So this ring. So why is this ring so evil? And
I have a question: Is the ring itself evil, or is it an amplifier?
it's evil by my definition of evil because it is a tool that's used exclusively to tyrannize and to take and to subordinate the wearers of the other rings, and by extension to tyrannize the entire world.
So,
To remove the
since
will.
it is used solely as a tool of tyranny,
Yes.
and therefore it is evil.
But
But
only by my definitions.
By
But
that
in
definition.
this fantasy
And
realm,
there-
there's
so-
no tool like that in real life.
We might theorize like if it was used for good, maybe that's debatable. But
It can't be used for good in
cannot.
this book. That's been
In this book.
demonstrated. Yeah.
Yes.
Because if
There is
we
no
ex-
history of it being used for good.
If we accept that autocracy is evil,
If we
it can,
accept it, sure.
it can't even be used by the Gondor people in an autocratic supremacist model. They can't. They'll surrender it to Sauron.
Right.
They'll lose
So,
it.
Having like the ring as a tool is that seeing it that way, what we've just laid out, is now helpful for me to start to understand cell phones as evil is like the same tool idea.
Yeah, because there's one cell phone to bind them all. Maybe not. That sounds too paranoid.
But like
There
as we
could
see,
be.
like there's
My point is there could be. That's what's going on in Moria. They're like making these fancy rings, and behind everyone's back, Sauron is making a master control switch. That's a classic trick, isn't it? To like,
right. It's like there's so with the phones and the apps, it's like, do you like consent to have like all of your data shared? Like, do you consent to all of the terms and conditions? And
Right.
like you're not reading it, but you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
and you're like giving a little bit of power to like something else somewhere else.
but
And often they are used in ways that are not healthy, not empowering. So like they're leaning towards that. Have been used in good ways. This is a Selly. It's a tool, to quote Childish Gambino, and that 17-year-old girl who used it to record 10 minutes or more, like 9 minutes and 47 seconds of the guy kneeling on George Floyd's neck was her courage and her using her phone to do it, which was a tool.
yeah. So right. So the three rings of the elves they have powers of rejuvenation and preservation. Those are their powers. And yet, when you activate the master switch, they stop being used. Like, great, that you could still use them for that if you were still in charge of how to use it. But once Sauron has the ring in his finger, you're not in charge of your own actions anymore. That's how I understand it.
We don't actually know. We haven't seen it.
No, but
It's like alluded to.
It is, and I don't want to quote Wikipedia per se, but there is a really nice chart on Wikipedia that I noticed that I looked at that had all the rings listed and what their powers are and what their potential, like the symptoms of them are. So like the rings for the dwarves, for example.
Because we don't get this. That's not in any of these books.
No, it is probably there. It's all based on textual analysis
Of the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
I think so. Maybe more like the Silmarillion and the commentary
Right.
stuff by Tolkien's.
Because I have no idea what the rings are used for.
Okay.
Got one for
I don't-
invisibility and it controls them all, but like, what does it do?
Yeah.
You just said the elves' rings are for rejuvenation and
It's a
Like,
bummer that
okay,
I don't
it's news
have
to me.
textual support for this, unless I do, which I might. So,
I don't unless I do.
well, I'm not looking yet at why the ring is evil in the notes, but I
if
am
you don't
now.
like this song, just wait till it ends.
Okay. I'll go back for it too because I'm sure it's there. I'm sure that someone says probably in the Council of Elrond something to the effect of it doesn't matter who's wearing what ring. Once Sauron gets that ring back,
Right.
everyone's going to be subordinated to him. I'm sure that that's the notion. Are you not sure that's the notion?
That's the idea, yeah.
That's so that, and he doesn't even have to be wearing it to do that to the men, presumably because men are so weak-willed, and they didn't craft the rings. The elves crafted their own rings, in conjunction, like Pixar and Disney or whatever, like in conjunction with Mordor, with Sauron.
Right.
Sauron crafted the One Ring, crafted by Sauron alone, but, quote, Celebrimbor was aware of him and hid the three. That's when it pops off, because he's like, oh, this dude has crafted a master ring to control. Okay, the textual evidence is in the stupid rhyme. One ring to rule them all.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the magic Sauron's doing, and it's evil because it's autocratic and possessive. He's going to control everyone else.
Sauron had the ring at one point before Isildur cut it off of his hand.
Yeah,
cut his fingers off.
Yeah.
So what were
They
the
must have
other
not been
rings
wearing,
doing
I
at
don't
that
know.
time?
That's a good question. And who was wearing it? I would assume maybe. So I don't know. That's
like
a
the
good
three
question.
rings. What was going on there?
We'll have to consult the new Amazon show.
You're just not
for
going to
the
be right.
Anyways, I don't want to get into who's wearing which rings because it confuses the hell out of me. But I think that Galadriel's wearing one, Elrond is wearing one, and Gandalf is wearing one. And I think Gandalf was given that ring at
Elf rings.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the contextual. You don't have the text evidence for this.
No, I do. It's
there somewhere.
Yeah, I don't have it written down right in front of me, but yeah,
Galadriel's
we went
for
over
sure
it. We
wearing
went over
one.
it in the Wizard episode. I'm pretty sure. Whoever's at the Grey Havens, whatever elf is guarding the Grey Havens, some dude with a C at the front of his name, gives Gandalf the ring as soon as they get there. When the Istari show up, he's like, "You're the guy." He gives him the ring. We went over it in the.
Yeah, I think I recall like at some point it mentions explicitly Gandalf has a ring on his finger.
Yeah.
When he's Gandalf the White.
Yeah, he's got rings. So anyways, I don't know who's wearing them during the Second Age when he's got the ring on. I would assume they took him off. I would assume Celebrimbor was like, everyone take off your rings. Put them away safe. Let's go fight this war.
Kiss the rings.
In the Shadow of the Past, the chapter, which we talk about all the time, the Wraiths, the 9 rings effects are described on page 76. That takes away their slowly saps them of visibility and of they're enslaved to the notion of the ring.
Sure.
The ring itself has an unwholesome power, quote, unwholesome power. Also, I have page 86, it says, I'm going to maybe have to look. It says page 86, the one ring has an intention and a volition of its own. The 3 were, this is Elrond, the 3 were not made by Sauron, nor did he ever touch them, but of them it is not permitted to speak. So much only in this hour of doubt I may now say. They are not idle. The question is those rings. What are they doing? But they were not made as weapons of war or conquest. That is not their power. Those who made them did not desire strength or domination or hoarded wealth. All evil things for us in our episode here. Those who made them did not desire strength or domination or hoarded wealth, but understanding, making, and healing to preserve all things unstained. These things the elves of Middle-earth have in some measure gained, though with sorrow. But all that has been wrought by those who wield the 3. But all that has been wrought by those who wield the 3 will turn to their undoing, and their minds and hearts will become revealed to Sauron if he regains the 1. It would be better if the 3 had never been. That is his purpose.
So it doesn't seem that the One Ring will then he will be able to control the 3 because they're separate. So it doesn't seem like there's a thread of the 3 within the 1, but it seems that the 1 will reveal their location.
Just be able to undo them.
It will maybe it means it's like they will undo them, but it's sort of like it does not like blows away the fog of war. You can see where they are, and then you can go after them, and you can get them, and then use them as well.
But listen, but all that has been wrought by those who wield the 3 will turn to their undoing, and their minds and hearts will become revealed to Sauron. So yes, revealed, but also what they tried to do will turn to their undoing. I think they will be corrupted. I don't know what the nature of that corruption will be.
I don't understand that it will turn to their undoing means, but it might. Does that mean that they will be revealed? Sauron have this immense power, and he will move with his army, conquer them, destroy them because they are too, like, a war of attrition or whatever. Turn everyone else against them. They'll be overpowered, and he'll be able to take those rings. That's sort of what I think. That's my initial reaction.
I think it means that, like an alchemical process that's gone out of control, something that started as a preservation sort of situation, a garden, becomes an industrial farm kind of model. I think it turns someone like Galadriel in some place like Lothlorien into someone like Saruman in some place like Isengard.
It will change like her nature and her as a person, her as a being from within, or it will change her because someone's going to march in
from
and
within,
take her out and make industry within.
From within is what I mean. All that has been wrought by those who wield the three will turn to their undoing. Like, I mean, look at medical science and agricultural science and how those things, which are pro-human adaptations, have turned into industrial nightmares and have turned to our undoing. We have better access to sugar now than ever before as a species, and it's killing us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I get that.
We did it for the right reasons. It got out of control. Cancer is a good metaphor for that. It's a dramatic reproduction.
But I feel like it would change Galadriel's nature as a thoughtful being.
We don't,
and like, I'm not sure about that.
We don't have to agree on it. It's obviously pretty opaque what's going to happen, because that never happens in the book. He never wields the one, so we don't have to worry about it. It's
ambiguous,
like it is to the men of Rohan as children. It's a shadow menace. It's a shadow menace. The Precious. The Ring is okay. The Ring is like a lot of things. The Ring is like the cat brain parasite thing. You know that? I know.
Yeah. I know this kind of, but I need a reminder.
I know I heard about it on Radiolab, and the cat brain parasite thing is this parasite that lives in a cat. So goes the story. And when it gets out of the cat, as in when a cat bites or scratches an animal like a mouse and it gets away, that the parasite gets into the cat, into the prey animal, the mouse or the human, but let's take a mouse for example, and that the goal of the parasite is to get back to its ecosystem, which is the cat. And the notion, as presented to me by Radiolab hosts in a show called Radiolab, probably, was that the parasite hijacks the neural functions of the mouse in such a way that the mouse desires to be near the smell of cat, specifically maybe the smell of cat urine and feces, in order to get into the territory in which the cat can eat the mouse and return the parasite to its natural environment.
That's a fantastic idea.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the science is like, but they
wouldn't
tell us that if it wasn't real science, right, Clark?
Right. Nobody lies to anyone. That idea of, I would adjust some of the wording, like that the mouse wants to be around it.
It's compelled.
It's compelled, or it's like, hey, this smells good.
Curious.
This is like, this feels like, hey, this is nice. This is attractive. I like this smell now.
Yeah. So the Ring is like that because it's trying to get back to Sauron. That's its only thing. That's like one of its main tracking functions.
Which is also then like, I like that idea because in the mind, like there's that power, and Frodo has those moments where he like wants to put the ring on, and like his hand moves that direction. As he, Gollum and Sam are walking and trying to get into Mordor, there's that bridge, and he starts to like just walk across the bridge towards Minas Morgul, like in the open, and his head swaying from side to side, and both of his companions tackle him and bring him back.
Yeah.
But he's not himself. He's sort of senseless, just moving in that direction.
The Ring is all about mind control and domination of will, and the notion that a ring can slip onto a finger is absurd. But it happens to Bilbo, I think. Does it happen to him under the Misty Mountains?
Yes.
And it happens to Frodo and the Prancing Pony. It
slips on Bilbo's finger.
Like, whoops, this ring slipped on my finger, as if I didn't put it on.
Right, as he like trips and falls, and Gollum goes over him and doesn't catch him. That's doesn't regain his precious.
That's goofy, and it's goofy that it happens to Frodo and the Prancing Pony,
it slips
too.
off Isildur's finger.
Yeah, slipping off, though, makes sense, and slipping on is absurd, and that's why that's Tolkien really driving home this notion. It's not like an accident. The ring is changing. Clear. The ring is changing size. Bombadil's not affected by it. That's just a neat side note. Sorry, go ahead.
The ring is... We do believe the ring is literally changing side in like a, quote, magical way.
I think they say that.
Right. So that is our understanding. It is literally getting bigger and smaller because it has a will of its own, even though the idea of a ring slipping on is stupid. Because also in Bree, the prancing pony, the ring pops up in the air and like Frodo reaches and it wobbles in the air.
Again, is this movie talking?
I think it's written.
Either way, I would assume he had his hand in his pocket. But either way, the ring slips on.
I think
you're going to go for it.
I think it wobbles in the air.
All right. While you're looking for that, I'm just going to mention this thing about Bombadil. Bombadil is not affected by the ring for whatever reason. When he puts it on, it doesn't make him crazy and it doesn't make him disappear. And he picks it up, puts it on, takes it off, gives it back to Frodo. He just doesn't really care. That's what they say later at the Council of Elrond. He just doesn't really care. It doesn't concern him, and if he was invited to the Council of Elrond, he would not come. That's what they say.
So, the wobbliness is movie fabrication of the ring slipping onto Frodo's hand. He was dancing on the table. He slipped and fell off. And everyone was ready to laugh, but Frodo wasn't there, so they were just ended in awkwardness. So skip a couple paragraphs down. This is in A Sign of the Prancing Pony on my page 182. Frodo felt a fool. Not knowing what else to do, he crawled away under the tables to a dark corner by Strider, who sat unmoved, giving no signs of his thoughts. Frodo leaned back against the wall and took off the ring. How it came to be on his finger, he could not tell. He could only suppose that he had been handling it in his pocket while he sang, and that somehow it had slipped on when he stuck out his hand with a jerk to save his fall. For a moment, he wondered if the ring itself had not played him a trick, like the ring played him dirty. Perhaps it had tried to reveal itself in response to some wish or command that was felt in the room. He did not like the looks of the men that had gone out. So there's no wobbliness that is a visual movie way of having the ring have a will of its own. It's slipped on, but we don't know.
Yeah.
He doesn't know either.
Henchies and Lesser Rings. The Nazgul. I gotta say this thing about the Nazgul. This is funny. A funny thing I noticed about the Nazgul. First of all, this one dude, the Lord of the Nazgul, he's also the Morgul King, right? He is, according to Google.
He's the commander.
There's only one guy who's always in charge, and he's also the Witch King of Angmar.
Yes, that's the one.
That dude's a badass. But the Nazgul, in their incarnation as the Riders at the beginning of the Fellowship, are weak as shit. Considering that they're these... So the thing that's interesting is they level up with the characters, with Frodo and Sam. As if Frodo and Sam are RPG players, the characters that they oppose get stronger and stronger. By the time it's Return of the King, the Lord of the Nazgul, when he enters Minas Tirith, he's devastatingly powerful.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, they seem to be relying on scent. Mm-hmm. Aragorn says that they act in the dark. Fire. They're scared of fire and stuff.
They're in the Wraith world. They exist there.
Sure, for the whole book or just in Fellowship?
For the whole book. Because they even, when Frodo was wearing it, someone said at some point, if he wears it too much, he will become a Wraith himself. And by overuse, you become a Wraith. We might think of Gollum as becoming sort of Wraith-like because over however long he's had it, hundreds of years perhaps, his body has changed to be thinner, gaunt, wraith-like, pale aversion to... He also has an aversion to the sun. He hates the white face. He hates the yellow face. Same way that the wraiths, as they are called, have the big hood. There's no form to behold. They would not show up in the sunshine, really, I guess.
While you were talking, I pulled up this Wikipedia page on the Rings of Power, and this chart, power and effect of the rings. Rings for men, it says the powers grant their invisibility, extended lifespan, and terror. Oh. And then the effects on the bearer are enslavement, fading to permanent invisibility. it does say that the effect on the bearer of the elven rings is nostalgia and procrastination, which, are sort of like inversions of acts of preservation and creation, right? Okay. Anyways, Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin and them, they hide like in ditches from the Nazgul in the Fellowship, in the Shire. You know what I mean? And like they come into the pony and they like stab the wrong beds. Like they're just like bumbling. They should waste the hobbits in the first chapters of the book. That's how it should go. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then
that wouldn't be a story.
Yeah.
Why are they weak?
I don't know, and I think it's partly because like they upgrade along with the hero in order to be a more presentable, formidable foe from an RPG perspective.
Yep.
They will never get out of the Shire if they have to face level 15 wraiths.
No one's going to play that game if you can't beat level 1.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Have you noticed that the Nazgul, when they inflict an injury, the injury is like a virus bacterial infection kind of trope. Like there's a little piece of the blade that gets stuck in Frodo, and there's like they can't heal him with the right. It's difficult to heal. It's like an infection of evil.
Yes.
Evil as infection is my point. That is more present with the Nazgul in the Fellowship than it is anywhere else in the book. The only other thing I want to say about the Lord of the Nazgul is that when he enters Minas Tirith, confronted by Gandalf, there's a big description of the guy being invisible and being big and evil, and everybody stops fighting like they can't fire their weapons and they can't raise their swords.
Because he wields fear like a power.
Yeah, while he rides in, and the quotation that I like is "grown to a vast menace of despair." That's what it is. That's like. Despair is the form that evil takes in most of the Minas Tirith moments, especially for Denethor before he kills himself.
That's what evil takes that form, or that's the symptom of
That's
evil.
the result of
That's the result, right.
Mm-hmm.
So Denethor has despair, the Witch King shows up, and
causes despair.
The soldiers are like, oh, there's no point. It's fear, despair. They don't do anything. So I feel like this is akin to that idea of despair is maybe like level 15 depression. If you're a person like you're depressed, if you're a person and you have depression, it's hard to get up in the morning. It's hard to do anything. The motivation's tough. I have questions about that.
You have questions about it?
Yeah. Well, not questions, but I guess I don't have no specific questions. I guess I'm questioning that idea. Sort of like Sauron, like the idea of trauma effects, and then you want to like break things because that's like the expression. Sort of like if one is suffering from depression, there is no motivation, and you can go into despair. They're akin to me. They're linked. Yeah. They're adjacent.
They are.
They're near.
And with despair and depression?
Yeah.
Of course. And they are also the result of something like, I don't love the word, in real life, I don't like the use of the word good and evil. I don't think it's useful or practical. But the definitions that we've applied to it here of discord, autocracy and control and possessiveness, and wastefulness, I do think they result in despair. And I do think that much of the despair and malaise, both sort of chronic medical despair and just casual despair that we experience is a result of our industrial disorder, which does those three things. It creates discord, it's fueled by and drives possessiveness and autocracy, and it is wasteful.
And this is interesting to think about, to look at today, like what's going on in contemporary society today with depression and mental health, and there's a shortness of therapists and counselors, and there's like long waiting lists, and the like post-pandemic world or pandemic recovery world, whatever this is known as that we're in right now, whatever this comes to be known as. But I'm seeing this, we see this in young people, an epidemic of this in young people. teenagers, preteens, adults, everyone.
Yeah, everyone who is engaged in this process and is well, I don't know about that.
So as a result of, as if this is like despair and depression as a result of evil, and if we think about evil as space, as like distance from love, then what if then a young person who is suffering from depression, and we think about that person as having too much distance from love? That's interesting to me.
That is interesting.
There's something missing, and it's love. Would love?
I think though
fill. And
I think love would fill, but I think we need to extend love, which has been difficult for humans historically. I think we need to extend love and compassion to non-human things and non-human processes in order to maintain something like balance for ourselves.
I watched like 3 minutes or part of a TED Talk of a woman from the, as she said, the misnamed Navajo Nation. I don't remember what she said, but she says Navajo's misnamed, but that's what we may understand it as. And she was talking about ways of caring for the earth, and not in a destructive way, but in a way that like adds to it. And for like 3,000 years, these processes, and part of it was like if you make the grass, the buffalo will come to the grass. And so it's not like it's not like they follow the buffalo. It's not like we make the buffalo come to us. We make it a place where the buffalo want to be.
Yeah. And I mean, not to get too far down the ecology rabbit hole, but then the buffalo eat the grass and shit, and they walk across it, and then more grass grows there.
Yes.
And they go eat the other grass that's growing. And then when they come back around, there's new grass.
It's a whole cycle, which also involves the idea of corruption, which is like the shit, the maggots, all of that. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. And maybe in the corrections of next episode, I find out this person's name.
Which person?
The person who did the TED Talk.
Oh. Yeah, you mean the misnamed Navajo Nation individual?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know her name right now. Or I could look it up right now. Maybe.
Word. I'm compelled by this phone to ring comparison that keeps coming up. I'm in a deep mode of phone impact analysis in my professional life, and I guess in my personal life. I'm concerned about cybernetic, autocratic control mechanisms, and how the phone exemplifies those things.
And I'm thinking about similar things, probably not to the same degree or not in the same way for sure as you are, but my idea and hashtag for the year is from the band Lake Street Dive. It's taken from them, and I've turned it into a hashtag free yourself up, parentheses, to love me, end parentheses. And I'm using this with students, like when they're on their phone, I'm like, hey, free yourself up from that. And I'm also thinking about the phones and the impact of phones on student and young person, like how that affects depression.
Mr. Pembrose. A lot of anger to work out. You got anything else to say about evil?
Are we like near the end here?
Yeah, we're at the end, and I guess it's where I want to say I never really wanted to. I never really for a while now, I haven't really wanted to engage with the notion that evil exists. I do tend to think of good and evil as being relative to the experience of the subjective individual. But I am comfortable with these deeper definitions of problems in ecology and civilization and culture and ontology that relate to discord, possessiveness and autocracy, and waste. I think that if we must define evil, I'm comfortable with those definitions. I'm explicitly not comfortable with definitions of evil that include otherness of individuals, especially like human populations. And to the extent that evil in these books corresponds to any of that stuff, we will be addressing that directly and explicitly in episode 7.
So here are a couple. I have 3 points from my notes for this episode. One sort of the intro, and I guess I'll read the 3 notes that I have. First note: the power of evil and the evil of power. Which came first, evil or power? The ring was made from Sauron's evil, and he has great power. The kings of men were kings with power that were given the, quote, evil rings, and they faded to wraiths. Hobbits have basically 0 power, parentheses, in geopolitical terms, bracket, same with Bombadil, so much so that he was eliminated from the movies entirely, end bracket, end parentheses. So they, the hobbits, are the ones that ultimately destroy the ultimate ring of power, and therefore the evil of Sauron. The other 2 are about men, and from the 2 Towers, the chapter of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit, Sam, there's a soldier who falls and lands in front of Sam, and there's guys faces turned away, and I think that's good.
Do you have a page number for that?
My page 301.
To what chapter?
Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit, or Herbs.
I wanted to get at this quote as the final thing. I'm glad
final
we're there.
thing?
Because this is the
All
only...
right, let's
let me just
circle back.
quickly say, this is the only time in the book I feel like we really get beyond a notion of strict good and evil. Sam seems to understand that it's relative.
He wonders if the soldier was really evil at heart.
Yes.
Right.
Because he sees his face, right? The face of a dead man.
I don't think he sees his face. I think the face is turned away. But I'll do the last quote, and then I'll put my notes down, and we'll get into it. This is 2 Towers, Faramir's talking to Frodo and Sam after dinner. Because they're like, oh, it's still late. It's not good to go to bed on a full stomach. Let's talk for a bit. So he's talking about men and kings descended from old Numenor that are more fascinated by death than life. They're fascinated. They construct great tombs and elixirs to try and find that everlasting life, like the elixir of life, rather than... So it seems like rather than living in the present moment, they're trying to be like, how can I extend this?
Who
Are
again?
they the kings of old, descended from old Numenor?
The northern kings or the southern kings or both, do you know?
I don't know.
I feel
I don't
like
think
the North
I'm not sure it was
Kingdom-
relevant to me because it's kings of men.
It feels to me like the North Kingdom fell into some sort of occult, or witch, the fact that there's the Witch King of Angmar, and the fact that all those dudes, they just seem really goth. The Northern Kingdom seems really, really edgy.
Goth in terms of goth. I was
Gothic, gothic in terms of grotesque, emphasis on the dark and dreary, magical, mystical, phantasmagorical.
So, and Faramir mentions at one point that they recite the names of ancestors. They will recite the names of ancestors and talk about all the ancestors without knowing the names of their sons. And this seems like neglect, and neglect is abuse. And I was wondering, is this evil?
The obsession.
I guess this is wastefulness.
Necromancy, you mean?
No, neglecting
The present.
Yes, the present, neglecting
Nostalgia.
your children to remember your ancestors.
Yeah.
So I came from this person and this person and this person, and it doesn't matter.
It is
all of that, and I am part of this. Aren't I great? I guess.
I think what you've done is demonstrated why the aesthetic of evil is often one of tombs and mortality and the sort of the hungry ghosts, unsettled pasts. Why that Gothic. I've been talking a lot about this stuff because we read Beloved, which is I think a gothically toned novel in AP English Lit and Comp. And why is it so creepy? What is it about ancestors and Halloween that's so creepy? And you maybe are nailing it, is that what's wicked about it is its obsession with the past, which is done and closed,
Yeah.
at the expense and neglect and waste of the present and future. Yeah, that's a neat and a deep philosophical through line.
There's also a sense of possessiveness, like I possess this is like my line.
Yeah.
Lineage.
Stagnation.
Oh, God.
Staleness, yeah.
Lineage, like bloodlines, and then you get into breeding.
You ready to get beyond good and evil for the final thing?
Or we can talk about this guy that Sam sees. You found this?
I'll just quote it. So they see that Sam and Frodo are witness to a battle between
An ambush.
Who's ambushed? The Gondor men ambush the
men of Gondor ambush
men of Harad.
Yeah,
Are they? They're Southerners. Yeah,
they're Southrons.
I think so. It was Sam's first view of a battle of men against men, and he did not like it much. He was glad that he could not see the dead face, so he cannot see the face. He wondered what the man's name was and where he came from, and if he was really evil of heart, or what lies or threats had led him on the long march from his home, and if he would not really rather have stayed there in peace, all in a flash of thought which was quickly driven from his mind.
Can I hit this one first?
Yeah.
So I have an experience very similar to Sam's. I went to art school. I studied photography. I remember being in the library once in the photo books in the section of photographers, and I pulled out a book called From August Sander, and I was flipping through it, and there was this photograph of a young man photographed full on, like not smiling, just like kind of a documented photograph of this person, and he's wearing a Nazi military uniform. And I had very similar questions to Sam in this moment, because we so often say Nazis are evil, and like here's this guy in a Nazi uniform, but is he really evil at heart? He's fighting on like the wrong side, the evil side, right? But wouldn't he have rather just stayed and farmed? And I was thinking about it. He looked like maybe he's 18 years old. Mm-hmm. I think the photograph was made in 1943, and this is like the war's gone on a while. I think I was questioning at this point when this photo was taken. My presumption was that he was photographed in his country, like at his home. Maybe he just signed up for service. Maybe he was just drafted. Yeah. He was just given this uniform, so he's like being photographed to document himself. Maybe this is the last photograph that ever existed of this person.
Yeah.
Is he evil? Would he rather have just not fought and just did whatever he did in life? Is he only fighting because people are coming into his country, the place that he loves? Maybe he loves it. This is all assumptions, speculation, but is that why he's in it?
Yeah, I think that's the case for most people who fight in wars, at least in the 20th and 21st century. That seems to be the case. I have no reason to suspect it would be otherwise. Previously, I don't think that we have I don't. Yeah, I think most. Yeah, I think the impulse for a living organism is to continue living and not to kill recklessly and wantonly, or for some cause that doesn't seem directly connected to one's survival.
Right. I recently have heard, I guess a year ago, not quite a year ago, some people, some like American citizens, United States citizens, that have gone over to fight as soldiers of fortune or soldiers of war, mercenaries in Ukraine, like to fight for that cause. Mm-hmm. But that's not what I thought of this soldier when I saw it, when I came across. Like I remember flipping through, seeing like, also thinking about myself as a young man at that time, thinking about like, and I've thought about if I was alive in 1940, would I have signed up to fight in World War II? And when I was 18, I felt very strongly like I probably would have done it. If I was alive in 1776, would I have signed up? If it was 1775 and Boston was under siege and I was a Maryland farmer or whatever, would I have gone up to serve? Right. Maybe.
So you're saying it doesn't necessarily mean you're evil, but the thing is, Clark, like you said, it's not really the intention. It is the outcome. So it doesn't really matter that our man in of herbs and stewed rabbits, it doesn't really matter that he would have preferred to stay home farming. It matters that he went to war and he was killed.
Right. Did he voluntarily go? Was he forced to go? Was power wielded over him to make him go?
It's one of the aspects of the second element of evil, right? Autocracy and control and possessiveness, right? The control of others' wills. Yeah.
I found the quote from Coates.
Do it. We're going to end this out with this quotation from Ta-Nehisi Coates.
So this is a quote that I got when I was reading. When I read the book, I was like, damn, that's powerful. And I copied it, I wrote it down, I printed it out. It's currently on my door at school. Here it is. But a very large number of Americans will do all they can to preserve the dream, capital D dream. No one directly proclaimed that schools were designed to sanctify failure and destruction. But a great number of educators spoke of, quote, personal responsibility in a country authored and sustained by a criminal responsibility. The point of this language of, quote, intention and, quote, personal responsibility is broad exoneration. Mistakes were made. Bodies were broken. People were enslaved. We meant well. We tried our best. Quote, good intention is a hall pass through history, a sleeping pill that ensures the dream.
That's a very complex quote from a very complex text.
About a very complex life.
Yeah, and I would recommend people investigate it, read the book, and try to understand what it means by the dream. And I do think there's something of that in what Saruman says about a higher purpose. I got this higher purpose, and that's my hall pass to absolutely destroy everything and to control people and stuff. And to genetically manipulate orcs.
And this is also the, like, see kings who are sanctified by God as their role of kings, see medical like the medical profession not caring about consent to do things and to destroy.
So to bring it all back around, maybe, I guess I want to draw a distinction between two different kinds of evil. This is a new thought. Saruman and Sauron are different, and Saruman has a high and lofty goal that he pretends is good. He might even believe it. Sauron wants evil. Sauron is malicious, malevolent. Saruman is neurotic, right? Sauron is an agent of death. Saruman is sort of a disciple, an unwitting disciple of death. He's like a patsy or whatever. Saruman is a guy who's supposed to be doing the right thing and even thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's doing evil stuff. Sauron is the classic Dark Lord, the bringer of destruction and waste.
I wonder if they're a good example of like lawful
and chaotic evil.
And chaotic
yeah,
evil.
I think they maybe are. I think they maybe are.
Maybe the damage that Ta-Nehisi Coates is evil neutral evil. Good
I think
intention,
that's
good intention, but not.
I think that's a Sarumanic evil.
Lawful evil.
Yeah, but it's calling itself lawful good.
Right.
Yeah. All right, we're done, right?
Don't be evil. Whatever that means.
We'll see you with a lighter topic next time when we talk about either orcs or Legolas and Gimli.
Either one's going to be lighter.
I guess so. I think maybe we want to do Legolas and Gimli next.
And then orcs.
Yeah,
supremacy.
take a little break. All right. Peace, y'all.